Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network, and today we are going to continue our conversation about privacy, about CBDCs, and of course, most importantly, solutions, what you can actually do about it, how you might want to reconsider your current life path to configure it better to be fit for liberty, for privacy, not only for now, but into the future generations. Today, we're going to be speaking with Aaron Day, who's with the Brownstone Institute and is also an author and touring around and spreading an important message about liberty right now, and particularly as it concerns CBDCs, Central Bank Digital Currencies. We're going to find out more about his work today. Thank you so much for joining me, Aaron.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. And like I know you're with the Brownstone Institute. I know some of your work, and I've come to know more of it. We got to briefly meet at the Libertarian Convention in May, and I know you're doing some really important things. And it also seems to overlap with some of the work that I've done. And I think so there'll be some in my audience who will be familiar with the efforts that you're making, and of course the concern around CBDCs, and there might be some who are still just kind of learning to understand that. So I look forward to getting your perspective on all those things. But before we get into what you're doing now, perhaps you can share a bit about your background. And I mentioned the Brownstone Institute. Any other associations or organizations you're involved that you want to mention?
Sure. My wife and I recently started the Daylight Freedom Foundation, which you can find at daylightfreedom.org. Which is kind of furthering the mission and the work that I'm doing at the Brownstone Institute, kind of promoting free will, abundance, and decentralization. My background is I started out as a serial entrepreneur in the mid-90s, started a tech company, sold it, got involved as an investor for a while, started a second company in the healthcare space, and that company was destroyed by Obamacare, Dodd-Frank, and the DOJ. Now, I wasn't specifically targeted. I was actually just collateral damage. But that kind of took me off on a path of becoming a liberty activist. So I moved to New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project. I was the chair of the Free State Project for a while, ran a number of political organizations, helped to get over 100 people elected at the state level. And then in 2018, I pretty much gave up on politics altogether and decided to focus on just exiting the system. Along this time, I was introduced to Bitcoin through the Free State Project, through Ian Freeman and Roger Ver in about 2012. And so I was using crypto for day-to-day transactions. I mean, in New Hampshire, there have been stores and restaurants that have been accepting crypto directly for well over a decade. And when I decided to leave politics, I decided to focus on solutions where you could apply this blockchain technology behind Bitcoin to other areas besides just money. So if you look at assets overall, money represents only 5% of global assets. So you can use the same technology behind Bitcoin to tokenize other assets, whether it's homes, cars, stocks, bonds, arts, collectibles. And I really decided to go focus on that. Then COVID happened, and then I started to see friends of mine, people in the Free State Project, getting targeted by the federal government. So Ian Freeman, who I mentioned, who introduced me to this early on, was arrested, and I actually went to his sentencing hearing. So he is in federal prison for 8 years for just selling Bitcoin, basically without a license. Jeremy Kauffman, who's another Free Stater, had his business destroyed by the SEC. He started Library. So I decided to look into, since I was already deeply involved with crypto, why is this happening? Why are these people being targeted for crypto-related things? Especially knowing that this isn't criminal activity. These are very much peaceful people that promote voluntary interaction. And my research found that CBDCs are much further along in development than I had originally thought. In 2020, there were 35 countries just at the research phase of CBDCs. Really, only China was the only country that was piloting a CBDC at this point. So you had 35 in 2020. Fast forward to today, there are 134 countries representing 98% of the global GDP at various phases of either piloting or researching or rolling out CBDCs. 11 countries have already rolled out CBDCs. There are more CBDC accounts globally now than crypto accounts. And when I realized this, I kind of connected the dots. I'm like, look, this is the single biggest threat to human liberty. The ability to program, monitor and censor people's financial transactions is basically the basis for digital tyranny and the end of free will. So I I wrote a book about it called The Final Countdown. And the purpose of the book was to educate people not only on what I've learned about CBDCs in terms of where they are in progression, but what the philosophy is behind it, to also educate people about fiat currency and the fact that all fiat currencies fail and the dollar will be no exception. And then the last half of the book is specific practical advice. So I exited the dollar in 2019. I've been living on crypto, gold, and silver since then without a bank account. And so what I tried to do in this book was to educate people so that, somebody who's not technically sophisticated could read this book and then actually go through the process of obtaining crypto and starting to figure out how to use it for day-to-day transactions in their life. What I ran for president, actually, in the Republican Party, not that I'm a Republican, but to try to raise this issue. I actually wanted to try to get into the debates just to sound the alarm bell about CBDCs. I wasn't able to get into debates or even get polling done, but I was able to meet with other presidential candidates. And I want to be very clear, there are no political solutions to this. I was simply trying to use this as a platform to educate the public, use the fact that the circus stage of politics is a way to get in front of people. And so since I dropped out of the race in October, I've been a fellow at the Brownstone Institute, and I've been going around the country doing 4-hour workshops where the first half explains the problem. And then the back half, what I found is while the book was meant to be self-sufficient, people have a problem taking that first step. Most people don't use crypto. I mean, I think I saw a stat last month, only 0.4% of Americans used crypto to make a transaction. So while many within the echo chamber are fighting, amongst themselves, amongst these various cryptos, 95% of the world has never used a crypto. And that audience is wide open to us. So in these workshops, I empower people. I get them set up with a wallet. I actually show them how to use it. I also give them goldbacks because this is a multi-asset approach. It's not a just this crypto or just this crypto. In order to stop CBDCs, we need to have a solution that has enough buying power and enough ability to handle transactions per second to compete with the CBDC that's upcoming. So that's the quick tour of the background and how we got to where we are today.
It's interesting, Aaron. I feel like I'm talking to a kindred spirit in some way. So here's my goldbacks right here and some silver I have in front of me and things like that. And I haven't had a bank account since 2008. I've been using Bitcoin since 2012. I first started getting involved in where I'm originally from in Houston in Texas, learning about it back then. But because I was already kind of following the kind of counter economic, learning more about that lifestyle and just that activism and strategy, really, I was starting to get paid for my journalism, and a friend was also into Bitcoin. He's like, hey, look, I'll sell you this Bitcoin and pay you that way. And unfortunately, I cashed out every time and did not hold on to any of the Bitcoin from back then. But and I also, around the same time, my book, which sounds similar to yours, and I'd love to get a copy of yours, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, is, similar to describing the problems and some of the philosophy behind the technocracy we're seeing and the push towards CBDCs and other things, and also tries to give some experience from my own personal life. So I feel like I'm talking to the perfect person, where usually I'm speaking to other people who are trying to get on the path that we both seem to be on. And so it's great to connect in that way, because there's not too many of us, unfortunately, as I'm sure you've seen, who are actively pursuing alternative counter-economic paths, whether that's through crypto or goldbacks or silver or some other alternative currency. And I do think that's changing, but yeah, it's great to connect to somebody else who understands and gets the importance of that. And that's really what I want us to focus on with my audience today, because like I said, some of them will be familiar with what I've shared, but I'd love to hear some of the things that you have going on and see where we might overlap. But before we get to that, if we could, I'm going to sort of anticipate that there are folks in my audience, because I see them commenting, who are already complaining because we've mentioned blockchain and crypto and Bitcoin. And these are the folks who never bought in, probably never will, and unfortunately have missed out on the opportunities that you and I and others have taken to use crypto to avoid banks and government in different ways. But they are adamantly opposed to the technology for one reason or another, conspiracy or just kind of, I don't understand it, whatever. And in many cases are correct about some of their concerns, like things that I know that I've brought up, that I see you on Twitter bringing up, this sort of co-opting of the Bitcoin community. But yeah, I just want to preempt that and give you an opportunity to share your thoughts on, how the crypto space has changed, and why you think folks who are skeptical towards blockchain, generally speaking, and crypto, because they see the potential negative use cases, why they should be open to some of the things that you're going to share.
Sure. Well, I mean, we have had similar experiences and similar paths. And, I started using Bitcoin in 2012 and I used it. And in fact, that's what it was supposed to be. Bitcoin was supposed to be used. Bitcoin was not supposed to be something that you acquired and hodled is the term that they use. That the whole point of it was, and the white paper says it's peer-to-peer digital cash. It was meant to be something that you use for trade, for day-to-day transactions, that was separate from third parties, separate from banks. That was the original idea. And that's how I was using it. And around 2017, Bitcoin had become very popular. There were large retailers like Expedia and Microsoft and Steam and others that were taking Bitcoin directly, where you could go to their website. Overstock was another one, and you could buy products and use your crypto wallet directly to make transactions. Well, all of a sudden, the activity went up, and the people involved with the project decided to not increase how many transactions per second. Without going into all the details, there are blocks. Every 10 minutes, a new block is created that has transactions. And the developers and others decided to keep this block artificially small at 1 megabyte, which means that Bitcoin can only do 7 transactions per second. That was never the original idea. From the very inception, Satoshi Nakamoto, the anonymous inventor of Bitcoin, said that Bitcoin was something that was supposed to be able to compete with Visa and MasterCard right out of the gate from the very beginning technology. So basically it was hijacked. And I will say there's another book that I didn't write, but a guy by the name of Roger Ver wrote, called Hijacking Bitcoin. Roger was very early into crypto. In 2010, he was the first retailer to take crypto. He was the first investor in Bitcoin companies. And he was there during this time period in 2017 when an arbitrary decision was made. And all of a sudden, the narrative shifted from digital cash to digital gold. So now it was something that was going to remain slow and expensive. But now the use case and the whole purpose of it is just a store of value. It's something you're just supposed to invest in to keep value, basically to compete with gold, but not to be used as a medium of exchange. And when you track down what happened, it turns out the same people that were involved with hijacking Bitcoin and making changes to it that keep it slow and expensive also funded all 3 US CBDC pilots. In fact, one of the core developers of Bitcoin is the co-author of something called Project Hamilton, which is the US retail CBDC pilot that is designed to replace cash. So there is reason for people to be skeptical. I am skeptical. I don't use Bitcoin either. It has been co-opted. There's a question as to whether it was originally a NSA or CIA project, because we don't really know who the original developer was. So that still remains unclear. But regardless of whether its original intent was to turn into a CBDC or not, it has been hijacked. And now people like Michael Saylor, who has worked with the CIA and the NSA and has been a contractor to these organizations and whose office is 10 minutes away from the Pentagon, he's now the front man and the spokesman out on TV, out on CNBC, telling everybody it's digital gold. He even did a video. He said the point of Bitcoin isn't to compete with the dollar, isn't to compete with the euro or MasterCard or Visa. We've got to comply with know your customer laws. You've got to comply with surveillance, comply with your taxes, and it's just supposed to be a store of value. That is a complete 180 away from the original intent. And what that's done is it's taken Bitcoin and made it something that isn't something that is a viable alternative to CBDCs. The CBDC pilot that I mentioned, this Project Hamilton, can do 1.8 million transactions per second. Bitcoin is still stuck at 7 transactions per second. So if the government announced tomorrow, we're rolling out the CBDC, people couldn't flock to Bitcoin, because in 2017, when the usage was high, the transaction fees were $50 and it would take 7-8 days to complete a transaction. It would be even worse than that today if in an emergency, people tried to onboard and actually use Bitcoin. So there's every bit of reason to be concerned. And Roger Ver is in prison. He was thrown into the same prison that John McAfee was in Spain. He's out on bail now, but he can't talk. So literally 3 weeks after he published this book, I interviewed him, and then he was snatched in Spain. Roger gave up and renounced his U.S. citizenship in 2014. So they are literally going after him for alleged tax things from a decade ago, and setting this up to catch him in a country like Spain. So that's Bitcoin. But there are other cryptocurrencies out there. There are 20,000 of them, but there are a handful of them that you can use, and that I use, that are more privacy focused. Because
before we get into that, I definitely want us to go there next, Aaron. I just want to make a mention for those who are not familiar with Roger Ver. Definitely, if you look at the Conscious Resistance, go through our website. You might remember, if you've been following the channel for a long time, in 2017, 2018, I did a speaking tour that was funded by Bitcoin.com, basically Roger. And it was all about promoting counter-economic activity. And I was going around setting up people with Bitcoin wallets. At that time, we were giving out, I think, $5 at a time. And I remember 2017, the tour was okay. When we tried to do it in 2018, I think by that point, Roger and his team had got behind Bitcoin Cash, and we were using that because of the problems that you're describing, because of the high fees, because of the block issues and all that stuff. So some folks who've been listening for a long time may remember those days and that issue. And actually, right after you interviewed Roger, Aaron, I was scheduled to interview him the week he got arrested, and unfortunately didn't get a chance to catch up with him. But I do recommend that book as well, Hijacking Bitcoin. And on top of that, if you've seen my recent articles, I did one after Bitcoin Nashville, Co-opting of Bitcoin, that looks into some of these things without even getting to the Michael Saylor connection, getting into a bunch of other bad connections there. And I've reported in the past Blockstream and connections to folks from the Bilderberg Group and all these fun characters. And of course, Whitney Webb and Mark Godwin have been pointing out to what they're calling the Bitcoin dollar and potential for stable coins or for surveillance. And there's a whole lot wrong with the space. And yet, despite that, there still are some potential opportunities. I just want to make that clear because, it's important we get that up front, Aaron, because there will be people who are skeptical and critical right away and say like, oh, you're just chilling for Bitcoin. But we're both readily admitting the concerns, the issues, the infiltration and the hijacking that has taken place. But that doesn't mean there are no solutions and there are no opportunities for privacy and for transacting goods and services via crypto. So let's get into that. Some of the tokens that you actually do use.
Yeah, this is exactly right. Technology has a freedom and a tyranny component to it. So it isn't necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. It completely depends on which flavor of technology you're using right now. So there's digital cash, right? What do we use as an alternative to CBDCs? And in reality, what most people are concerned about with CBDCs, the ability to have your money tracked and censored, we already have with the dollar today. That's actually built into the fiat system. So what's really important is actually exiting the dollar, because the dollar is already bad. CBDCs just add an additional level of programmability that will tie your use of money to your social credit score. So I wanted to make that point clear. But there are cryptos that I use, like Zeno and Monero in particular, and Bitcoin Cash with something called Cash Fusion, which helps to obscure the identity of the transactions. This is where I've been focusing a lot of my time. And I mentioned this one, Zeno, because it's new and people haven't talked about it. But as I mentioned, when I exited politics, I started to focus on how to use blockchain technology in ways outside of cash. So how do you make the stock market more efficient? How do you make all of these other areas that have third parties in the middle, that are inefficient, that are using centralized databases? And so, and in my research, I've been working on tokenization actually for 6 years now. But in my research, what I found is there's something even worse than CBDCs, and it's something called the Great Taking. And I don't know if you've talked about this on your show or not, but it's David Rogers Webb wrote this book. He was a hedge fund manager, well experienced in Wall Street and investing, and he was studying the 2008 crash. And what he found is that after the crash, a bunch of folks in the banking industry got together and made changes in the laws of all 50 states. And what those changes represent is when you have your account through a stockbroker or your 401k, you don't own those stocks. In fact, already today, when people say that BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street own all of these companies. Well, the reality is they don't own the companies. It's your money. It's the investors' money that is given to them to be managed, but they do have the voting rights. So when you start a company, you usually get stock certificates and you get to vote as a shareholder. But if you own a 401k, you don't ever get to vote because you've given up your voting rights to BlackRock and to Fidelity and to these other entities. The law changes that were made after 2008 are such that if there's a big financial collapse, the stocks that you think you own, the 401ks you think you own, will actually be scooped up by the secured creditors. So it'll actually be the large banks through bankruptcy that will end up owning everybody's assets. So this is called the Great Taking. The reason I bring it up in the context of Zano and tokenization is what they're designing, in addition to the US CBDC, is something called Regulated Liability Network. And this is where everybody's assets are going to be tokenized and represented by digital tokens, whether we like it or not. The only question that we have is it going to be like a CBDC where the tokens are controlled by other third parties and they can be censored, or are they going to be tokens that we have in our possession that are private, that we have the information about? So what I like about Zano is it's a privacy coin in its own right, where your identity, your transactions remain anonymous, but you can also tokenize things and trade those things with people all over the world. You can tokenize anything of any size. You could tokenize your house, stocks, bonds. I actually just recently tokenized a goldback and sold it to somebody online with no third parties. So literally anything that you own, any asset, can be tokenized, and Zano allows you to do this. So I view Zano as being a solution that addresses this other 95% of global wealth that's not money in terms of assets. So there's Zano, there's Monero, and then Bitcoin Cash. Again, with something like called Cash Fusion, and then I use Litecoin and a few other coins. But those are basically the primary ones that I use. And I'd say Zano and Monero are where I have the most interest recently. But I also say, because I do these workshops, I tell people what I'm doing, and so I'm not shilling for anything. I'm not working for any of these coins. So, but since I live on these alternative assets, I use whatever works, and so I report on changes because things change, projects change. You learn, one new project comes on board, you might learn something about another. So
absolutely,
that's why I suggest to follow me on Twitter at Aaron R. Day, because I will give updates. So, I don't want this to be something where somebody's like, oh, well, he said those coins. I'm saying what's interesting and useful now, but it's an ongoing journey and an ongoing process.
And the space is ever evolving, right? I mean, like, that's especially true in the crypto space more broadly, because besides the arrest of Roger, we also saw arrest of, for example, Samurai Wallet, right? So people who are trying to do privacy tools, and whether that's wallets, tokens, encrypted messengers, et cetera, occasionally these people come under the the bullseye of the law, and then a project goes down. Or other times, just a lot of great projects don't get the support they need to stay around long enough to really, help out. So things do come and go, and it is important, I think, to be adaptable. Like, that's one of the big things, right? And it's probably something you've learned, Aaron, as well, because besides using the privacy tokens in different ways that you mentioned, there's also things that I've heard you talk about that I've done a bit as well with buying gift cards and things of that sort. Maybe you could talk to I don't want you to give away your whole presentation, because I know you do a 4-hour thing, but just how, somebody's asking, okay, so you buy Bitcoin and what do you do after that? I mean, you buy Monero, what do you do after that? How do you go buy food at the grocery store? I know you have some answers. Some may be different than what I pursue, so I'd love for you to share that.
Yeah, and again, this is a perfect example of where things have changed. Right now, what I'm using and what I recommend is something called Cake Wallet. This is a wallet, open source wallet that you can download either on your mobile phone or on your computer. And it works. It really started out with Monero, but it has multiple coins. It does have Monero, it does have Bitcoin Cash, and they are going to be using Zano as well. And what I can do from within the Cake wallet. So in the event that there aren't many merchants that take crypto directly, but I live in New Hampshire, and so there are actually some places where I can buy things directly out of my crypto wallet. But chances are, wherever you are, probably you don't have very many of those options available. So what you can do within the Cake wallet is you can buy gift cards, and you can even buy a debit card, like just a generic MasterCard with up to $1,000 on it. And you can use that just as if you had a bank account. There are sometimes limitations. It's not as universally as accepted as your bank debit card might be, but it's generally been a pretty good alternative. And so they have, hundreds of different merchants in there. So as an example, I, just went to take my kids to go see a movie. I used Monero. I bought an AMC gift card. We went in, bought the tickets and bought the concessions and everything. And that's one way of going about doing it. Now, longer term, obviously, the whole point of this was to be peer-to-peer cash. So what we need, if we're going to have an alternative solution to CBDCs, is we need more merchants directly accepting crypto. And I've been working behind the scenes on trying to create a point of sale system, because this is kind of the weak link for all of this, is to give merchants a tool so that they can take multiple cryptocurrencies and even goldbacks in tokenized form or even physical form and have an easy way to do that. That's actually the big bottleneck for broad adoption right now, but I'm kind of behind the scenes working on that as well.
Oh, I look forward to seeing what you do with that, Aaron, because I definitely, obviously that's an important component. And I've seen different companies come and go. And, one thing I've noticed is there'll be companies, for example, BitPay. When I first started using them back in 2015, 2016, it was no KYC. And there was just, you could get the card and send crypto to the card and use it. And it was super simple. And I haven't used it in years because they started asking for like a face print and all kinds of other stuff. And so I noticed that some projects will start out very privacy oriented, or at least, the space, of course, was a little more Wild West years ago. And then it gets more regulated as it goes on. Or, they have projects just get afraid. Some projects like Local Monero just decide to shut down themselves out of fear of, government reprisals for offering these types of services to people. But one question on the card aspect. So when you're using Cake Wallet, like you mentioned, getting the gift cards for the movie theater, if you get the just general MasterCard or Visa or whatever it is that a physical card, or is that something you still need a smartphone to kind of like display the digital card, or how does that work?
For that one, I haven't checked the physical part of it. I've used the digital version of it, but I think you probably can get a physical version. I use different crypto debit cards. And actually, to your point, I used to use BitPay. And for years, I used a BitPay debit card. And that's a perfect example where all of a sudden I got 8 days notice where that was cut off. And that kind of thing happens in crypto. So, but yeah. I'll have to double check because I haven't tried to get a physical version. So I can't really speak to that.
Yeah, I look forward to learning more, because I know of Cake Wallet, of course, but I haven't bought the cards from within the wallet. And, to the other point you made, and this to me is like the ultimate solution, the big picture that I think is taking place in bits and pieces here and there, and maybe more so outside of the US or outside of places like New Hampshire where people are a little more organized, is building that peer-to-peer counter economy. Because at the end of the day, as the internet itself, of course, the ultimate goal is decentralized versions of accessing the internet itself, decentralized currencies, et cetera. But for most people who aren't going to be even aware or pursuing those things, how do we still exchange value across long distances? That's a big question, right? But one of the answers in terms of supplying many of our needs, maybe not every need, obviously, but many of our local needs, is to have that local community where you can go pay, goldbacks for your dentist, or go to the local restaurant and pay in Bitcoin, et cetera. And so that was much, what my goal was back in 2017, 2018, when I was much more optimistic about the space. And like, we just got to get as many businesses and as many people, small businesses, entrepreneurs, et cetera, accepting crypto, and that'll create the counter economy. And I still think that's the answer. But unfortunately, people have either been told, Bitcoin particularly, but crypto, it's just an investment. They don't even understand the need to get beyond fiat currency, et cetera, get beyond the Federal Reserve, central banking, or they have that kind of like, it's just an investment, it's just a way to make money, or maybe they've been scared away because they're told it's just drug money, terrorist money, et cetera. So what are your thoughts on how we can make an effort, and any advice to people who are listening on how we can build that counter economy? In Mexico, we are going to, for example, like local farmers markets and the organic spots where it seems like people are more open-minded, I guess you could say, and they're anti-Monsanto and things like that, and trying to get these small businesses accepting Monero and building the local Monero economy, because we did have local Monero and it worked really great here in Mexico. It was very easy to go from sending someone Monero if I needed to get pesos, and they could send you a bank code where you just go to the ATM, no ID, no bank account necessary, put in a little code and it spits out your money. It was beautiful and it worked great for a while. and then local Monero disappeared. So now we're focused more on how we can build it in our particular town and city. But do you have any thoughts on that, how we might encourage others out there to focus on building that peer-to-peer economy?
Well, I do think that the point of sale system is key. And actually, to your point, one of the issues with this is I need to just do this as an open source project. I'm not going to do this as a central for-profit company, because you can't. That's one of the reasons that the point of sale systems that exist have gone away, because of this pressure. So we just need some open source, simple solution that connects with these things that literally can't be shut down. So that's going to be an important tool, because because I will say this, there is more interest than there was maybe in 2017 or 2018 because of COVID. So that's one of the good things about being at the Brownstone Institute, which has really been focused on things like exposing the lockdowns and the mandates and the censorship industrial complex. There are millions of people all over the US that we would have never been talking to pre-2019. There are people that have been that have had their lives completely upended by COVID tyranny, and they're people that we never in a million years would have been looking at crypto. So that has actually changed people's perspectives, as has inflation. So the people that otherwise would not have been reading End the Fed or even paid any attention to Ron Paul, everybody is now paying attention. Everybody's now aware that the dollar is in bad shape, because they see it in their food bill and they see it every month as they're continuing to run out of cash, and as debt is reaching these new fanatical levels. So I'm actually a little bit more optimistic now, just because the situation since 2020 has kind of opened people's eyes. I think the key to success is to just start, get some crypto, get some goldbacks. One of the things that I do is I will use a goldback as a tip. I always tip in goldbacks, and then I give people a card that they can scan to learn more about what it's all about. So start one transaction at a time, one local merchant at a time. That is really all it takes to start getting the process going. Because one of the other things that happened during COVID is, because of the $2.2 trillion that the government kind of, printed out of thin air and handed out, that disproportionately benefited big companies like Walmart and Amazon and Microsoft and Costco. And so small business owners are very aware, because they felt, the ones that kind of survived felt the pain directly, and are very aware that the government has been putting them at a disadvantage. So you will find more receptivity with small business owners as well. But I just say start, one transaction at a time, and find people in your local area. But for me, the food freedom groups, liberty groups, health freedom groups, I mean, these are all aligned organizations that already have folks. It's interesting, because of the issue around vaccination, you would think that there would be overlap, and there is overlap now, but previously a lot of people in the health freedom side of things really didn't pay any attention to crypto, and now they're more open to it. So I think there are a lot of groups that we can align ourselves with, and I would say just start small, start dabbling in it, start figuring out how it works, get a wallet. Use the wallet, just make a single transaction. Once you make your first transaction, then you start to see how it works. Test out goldbacks, and then start giving them as a tip. And if we do that, this is why I say these elections don't matter, right? We have all these people that are sitting around arguing over one choice that they're going to make 90 days from now that will have no impact on their lives. Yet we make 35,000 choices every single day, from whether we brush our teeth or not, whether we post on social media, what we eat, what just in general, what we read, what we do, what money we use. So start small, and start by making incremental decisions every day.
Beautifully said. I love it. All right. Well, let's talk about some of the talks you've been doing. You touched on it a bit earlier. It's a 4-hour presentations. How many of them have you done so far? What other cities you got coming up, and how can people, get an event in their city if there's not one happening already?
I've done a couple of big ones so far, and now we're lining up 17 more based on what the reaction from the first two. So we've got, if you go to daylightfreedom.org, you'll see the cities. So we had a whole influx of people that are interested in these, and now it's just the logistics. The next one we're going to have is in Nashville on September the 8th. And then we are booking them out for the rest of the year. I think we're going to be October the 5th in New Jersey, and then the other dates will follow. So right now, when you see the 17, those are currently being planned. So we have people that are basically in a group trying to help us with the logistics to find a venue, and so we're trying to kind of nail down. If you click on the Empower tab there on the site, the Empower tab lists the different cities that. There we go. Cities, or in some cases, states. So it's in some cases based on the demand. We have a whole bunch of interest in California, and we may do it. And we've already done one in Silicon Valley. We might do LA. Florida, we're actually planning a couple right now, one in Orlando and one in Miami. But there are forms on the site, and you can go to each city, or if your city's not listed, you can just go to the main Empower page and you can fill out your contact information. And that's the best way for us to get in touch, to find out if you're interested in either attending or sponsoring or helping with the logistics. And the site also goes into all of the details of what is in the workshop itself. So you will walk out of the workshop with my book, and you will get a wallet, and I will give you crypto, a couple of different kinds of crypto. You'll actually get a gold back, you'll get silver, and then an explanation on how to use all of these things practically for day-to-day life. So I'm excited about it. The response has been it was much better than I thought when we did the first couple. But for me, it's now been about trying to make it easier. This is why I got to the point of sale system. You realize when you sit in front of 200 people and you try to onboard 200 people at once to crypto, you realize how hard these tools are from the perspective of the average user. So much of crypto, and I would say one of the faults with crypto, most people use digital payments now. The overwhelming majority of payments are digital. And so the problem with crypto is that it's largely been 20-year-old guys developing software for other 20-year-old guys. I mean, some of this just boils down to creating things that are easy to use. People use Apple Pay, they use Google Pay, they use Zelle, they use Venmo. Yeah. We don't have tools that are as easy as that. And as soon as we build those, people will use them because they're already trained on how to use digital money. People are less concerned about, they should be concerned about digital money in fiat form, but the barriers that people had before about even using technologies that relates to money, those have evaporated. Now it's just a matter of providing better solutions that are tied to privacy and tied to crypto than these solutions that are tied to the state or that are easily surveilled.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, the things with privacy as the standard and privacy built in, because the average person isn't going to take 10 extra steps to figure out how to make their tool private. They're just going to go with what's easy, what's accessible and available. So I look forward again to seeing what you do with that. So the website, daylightfreedom.org, you show it one more time. There's plenty of different cities and states that are being planned. I encourage people to check it out. And like I told you before, Aaron, when I make it back to Texas, if you don't have one planned already, I'd love to help see how we can partner together on bringing something to Houston, because I know there's libertarian groups, health freedom groups, and others who would be interested and concerned equally about what you're sharing information about. And my channel, my work, we really do try to focus on what the solutions are. And I think we've done a good job of outlining that, whether it's gold backs for those who are like, I'm not touching crypto, I don't understand it, etc. Well, we're trying to make it easier, trying to make it simpler, but at the same time, you do have other alternatives. I've seen other people pursuing alternative currencies and cash alternative currencies in other ways, people who prefer barter, whatever. The point is trying to consider alternative systems to the ones that they are building, what I often term slavery systems like central bank digital currencies and others that are not going to lead to more privacy, more liberty in the long term, and in fact will lead to the exact opposite. So it's important that people can get as practical as possible. Aaron, what was your book that you mentioned earlier, the one that shares your story and how you do what you do?
My story, my book is called The Final Countdown, Crypto, Gold, Silver, and the People's Last Stand Against Tyranny by CBDCs.
Beautiful. I'll definitely make sure to put the links to your book. We mentioned Roger's book. We'll put that in there as well. And I'm curious, so you're with the Brownstone Institute. Is Brownstone supporting the tour you're doing, the talks you're doing, or is that kind of independent? Because Jeffrey Tucker's an old friend and he's been on this channel numerous times. So we definitely love the work that Brownstone has done.
I wouldn't say they directly sponsor they sponsor my work and my writing, but I wouldn't say the workshops explicitly.
Gotcha.
But which is
why
I
was just curious.
which is why, but I formed a specific nonprofit to do that. So all of the money that comes, they're structured, they're break even so far. So this isn't I'm not trying to maximize profits. I'm trying to get the word out as quickly as I possibly can.
And I totally understand. I mean, this is why we both written books about how we do what we do, and we're trying to get it out there. It's important because now, I mean, if there's ever been a time to get people actively thinking about these things and not just thinking about it, but hopefully following through and changing their lifestyle, maybe that's where we can start to wrap up here, Aaron, because one of the things I've realized is it fundamentally comes down to whether or not somebody wants to be free. And for some people, especially in the social media age of clicks and likes and instant gratification, it's difficult for them to look past the present moment and to look a little further into the future. And even those who can look into the future and say, wow, it looks like there's some bad things the government's working on, they don't necessarily think perhaps I should start planning for that future and thinking about a way to navigate that, or work around it or avoid it or whatever. Or folks fall back onto I'm just going to vote for somebody and hope that they can fix the whole situation. Like there's these, I guess, kind of tried and true excuses is what they really are that I hear, and I'm sure you've heard them over the years, but it ultimately, from my view, comes down to people who want to be free or not. And I often say this might involve lifestyle changes, changing your habits, changing your relationships. For some people, like you mentioned, COVID, people moved from one state to the other, whether that was to Texas or somewhere they felt was more free, or some people came to Mexico to get away from tyranny. Sometimes you have to do quote unquote extreme things if you want to stay free, and that might involve realistic changes. And I think that that's where sometimes there's resistance for people, because even if they see the potential bad thing in the future, coming at them, they're also kind of comfortable in their current circumstances. Is this something that you run into as far as people just not wanting to do the work, so to speak? And, any ideas on how we can counteract that?
Well, I mean, this is how I got to the point of writing a book and making it a 4-hour workshop, because the first part of it is if people understood what's coming, if people understood how CBDCs work and how they're tied into tracking and what it means in terms of they'll be able to determine what you can and cannot buy. And eventually this is actually going to be tied into an energy credit-based system, which you can see there's a MasterCard Doconomy card, which they've already created in conjunction with the UN, according to the Sustainable Development Goal number 13, where MasterCard's already working with 150 companies. They're already tracking your credit. And with this credit card, it actually shuts off the card when you use too much carbon. This is the future of CBDCs on a global basis. So it literally is the end of free will, to the extent that what you're even going to be allowed to do, where you're going to be allowed to live and travel, what you're going to be allowed to eat, who you're going to be able to associate, is going to be determined by this social credit system tied to digital money. So what I found is once people understand that, and once you start educating them on technocracy, then they're more willing to consider these things. But what I found was it actually took meeting with people in a room and setting them up with a wallet and getting them crypto. There was a barrier on, even you might be able to get to the point like through the book where people are like, oh, well, okay, now I'm frightened. My point in life isn't to go spread around doom. It's to empower people with solutions. But people were reading the book and saying, well, yeah, I know what I'm supposed to do. I know what the book says about downloading a wallet, but I just didn't do it. Which is why I got to the point where you just get people in a room that are all in the same area. You sit down with them and you actually physically walk through it. And then you're also creating a community in the workshop itself of people that live in the same area that can start forming a support network. So I found that it takes that. I mean, it would be great if I could just put all these materials online and hope that people are just going to adopt it. But that's not been my experience. It requires kind of the in-person interacting with people face to face to get it done.
Yeah, I've had similar experience, and I think you're 100% right. Doing these workshops, these in-person teaching sessions is really the way to go, because some people are overwhelmed, and even again, it ultimately comes down to it. Like I've got another buddy, Hakeem Anwar, who makes the Above phone. They sell de-Googled phones with open source distributed decentralized apps, and now they're making laptops, and he's had people buy them from him, but then he'll run into them 6 months down the line. They're like, I still haven't taken it out of the box, I'm so intimidated. So we have to overcome these barriers one way or another, and I think that you're going to great lengths to make it as easy as possible with your book, with your workshops, and with making yourself available. And that's, we're both trying to do as much as we can to say, hey, look, it is possible to kind of live outside of the system. And it's something, like we said earlier, to be adaptable and to navigate, because it's not always easy and tools come and go, and you got to be able to navigate that. And it's not easy. So the more we share this knowledge and kind of crowdsource this information, the easier it's going to be for others to come along. And as more of us are doing it, we're going to see that creation of these parallel systems, especially like you're talking about the point of sale, that make it much easier for those who are coming after us. And that's kind of what I see we're trying to do here, is we're pushing out into the edges, bringing everybody we can as we build the next stage, and in the truest hope that humanity can stay free in the face of CBDCs. So thank you, Aaron, for your efforts. And I did want to mention, I noticed that you, along with a few other friends, are speaking at Monerotopia. I'll be there as well in Mexico City in November. So we'll get to hang out a little bit more there. And I invite everybody who doesn't know about Monerotopia, but if you want to get deeper into this community of people who care about crypto in a truly private way, I spoke last year in Mexico City. It'll be in Mexico City again this year in November. Great opportunity to come connect, as well as just checking out one of Aaron's upcoming workshops or getting one in your community. Anything you want to leave us with, and any websites, anything you'd like to plug, feel free to mention it.
Yeah, no, I would just say daylightfreedom.org, and then I'm on Twitter at Aaron R. Day. And look, these types of things, trying to create alternative systems, it doesn't hit the mainstream all at once. Every technology or idea goes through a phase where you get innovators and then you get early adopters. I mean, there's just a normal phase to this. So right now we're just at the trying to find early adopters, and that's just the normal part of the life cycle. So I don't get too discouraged by that, because I know that that's what we're trying to do. We're not going to get 50 out of 100 people. We're trying to get 2 or 3 out of 100 people to start at this point. And then once we get them onboarded, then they become, what's going to give momentum moving forward, because they're going to roll out CBDCs, by the way, at once in an emergency. That's how all of this happens. Patriot Act, TARP, CARES Act, that's what's going to happen with CBDCs. So right now it's just building kind of the first line of defense of early adopters that can help bring other people on when the emergency strikes.
Yeah, that's very important. Thank you, Aaron. Thanks for doing that important work. And you mentioned emergency. Everybody who's been following my recent reporting, next month in the New York City, the United Nations is holding the Summit of the Future, where all member states are expected to sign the Pact for the Future, which currently includes language about an emergency platform that would give the UN a lot of new powers in the event of some shock that hits multiple regions of the world. And like Aaron's saying, bringing out CBDCs is a part of that plan. And you've heard it from me, you've heard it from others now. You're well aware the technocratic state is facing us. It's staring us in the face right now. And a big component of that is, of course, economic. We have choices. We can have this knowledge and do nothing with it and just stay on our path and watch it happen. And I think sell out the future generations, the coming generations, or we can take this knowledge and acknowledge that we're in a difficult situation, but also decide to do the difficult work that is required of us so we can build something, build an alternative path, a parallel path for those who do value liberty and privacy, because that's pretty much what it comes down to, my friends. We can either do nothing or we can take action. So I hope you'll check out Aaron's work, check out the workshops, and check out his book. All the links will be listed below. Until next time, as always, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.
Since 2012, the Conscious Resistance Network has been an independent media organization focused on empowering individuals through education, philosophy, health, and community organizing. We work to create a world where corporate and state power do not rule over the lives of free human beings. Our motto is leading by example and helping others in their pursuit of freedom. Visit theconsciousresistance.com to find our articles, documentaries, interviews, podcasts, books, and more. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free.